Well, I'm back. I'm finally back in my familiar room and next to this big board, and I'm so glad that of course is the case, because as you of course watched my previous two videos, which were the review of match week number 7, you can tell how bad the quality of those video was. I mean, I know in the first review I basically had a small board, and it took me about like 20 minutes to find a spot in my hotel room to put the small board and basically put it standing there while I of course do the review, but also the place that I put the small board down and put it standing like that, the lighting was definitely not at its best, and hence that's why the quality of that video in terms of lighting was not that good. And then of course the review I did when I was in LA, which is the Sunday review, that was also a very poorly quality kind of review, because not only the lighting was an issue, but I couldn't find a space in my hotel room where I can put the board on its own. So I literally had to hold on to my board while I was, of course, doing the review and also reading the notes of some of the most notable things that happened in those games. But again, I'm glad that I'm back and I have my familiar whiteboard with the stands that I have. But hopefully in the future, if I do have to do something I did during this weekend and during a review on the go, hopefully next time I might ask the hotel staff if they have like a big board, or maybe even have a stand, and I can basically do that without having to bring on my mini travel boards that I have. Now, that being said, I did bought that mini travel boards a couple of days ago, and yeah, if I of course decided to do that, then I basically just wasted my money in terms of buying that mini travel board. But anyway, let us actually get into today's video, which is the news of the week. And since MLS is going to be off for 2 weeks and have their first of what would be 2 mini summer break that they're going to have, because next month we're also going to have a mini summer break and kind of a Gold Cup break where MLS is going to be off for a couple of weeks. Most likely we're going to get more news that's going to happen in these next 2 weeks, and I might think about bringing back what I did in the off season, where I do 2 news of the week per week, if there's going to be a lot of news and a lot of transfer rumors that has happened in the past couple of days. But in this past week, the first news we're going to talk about is actually a news that happened yesterday. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have heard about this, but that is MLS will create a new league in the 3rd tier of in 2022, and basically this league is going to pretty much like a reserve league, where all the teams that is currently like a second team or a reserve team for an MLS side, and also the other team that is affiliated with MLS team that's currently playing in the lower leagues like the USL Championship, well, they will all move to this brand new league. And in some way, this new league that MLS is creating is going to be similar to what MLB did with their minor league, where all of those minor league teams, whether it's in single A, double A, or even triple A, are all controlled by the MLB, and all of those teams are affiliates with well, actually not all of them, but most of them are affiliates in terms of the teams that is currently in the MLB. Now, I have heard some mixed reaction in terms of this news, and I have heard that some people do like it because of the fact that now all these second teams in MLS that it is currently in the USL Championship, they can of course now move into a designated league that is appropriate for them to be in, because I know there's a lot of people, and certainly USL themselves, are kind of not happy the fact that a lot of these reserve team are currently play or a lot of these MLS reserve team are currently playing the USL Championship, and they're kind of really out of depth when it comes to that case. Now, the people that is not happy about this news has a lot to do with the fact that this does create a little bit of problem in terms of even the lower tiers, and not like in the second tier of the USL Championship, but more like the 3rd or 4th tier, where one example of that is that the USL League One, since there is I think half of the team in that league currently is affiliates with an MLS team, or they're like a second team of an MLS team. Once they do decide to leave to this new league, then the USL League One would literally just left with 4 teams, and you simply cannot run a league when you just have 4 teams there. Now, granted, maybe there's going to be some teams, and I know there's a lot of cities that have been trying to get a USL team, and I'm pretty sure USL would just tell them, instead of joining the championship, why not, of course, join join the League One because we desperately need teams there. I don't know if those cities are going to be happy because they rather want to be participate in a second tier competition rather than kind of a third tier competition in the USL League One. So there's that as a bit of an issue. But again, overall, I think this is a good idea, and that we knew this was going to come eventually, where there's going to be a designated league where all of these teams, of course, that's currently in MLS is going to have their reserve team that is going to be playing in this specific league, and it just kind of makes more sense for them to do so compared to these second team that is playing in different league like the USL League One and the USL Championship. Although another thing that I'll also say that why people are not happy about this is that this is kind of start to feel like MLS is starting to have a control monopoly toward the US soccer pyramid. And when I look in the future, this seems like it is going to be the case where MLS eventually is going to control the pyramid. And if that is the case, then that would really cause problems, and it really destroyed some of those grassroots leagues that is in the lower part of US soccer. And not to mention that this could also maybe create a little bit of competition, in that MLS and USL might be going against each other, and I don't want that to happen. I want both leagues to kind of just respect each other and don't have to kind of fight against each other in terms of what is actually the better leagues and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I still think that this does kind of make sense, and that I do kind of like the idea that now a lot of these reserve teams that is playing in the lower league can now be actually in a designated league that MLS is going to create in 2022, and not just spread out in terms of other leagues that it just doesn't feel like they kind of belong into those leagues. But now moving on, in terms of next news, is that Barnsley has declined a purchase option of Daryl DK, which means that DK is now indeed going to be going back to Orlando City, although I'm assuming he's only going to be back there for maybe a month or two, because I'm assuming this also means that there's going to be a bidding war that is going to start. Now, obviously, it's not surprising that Barnsley decided to decline the purchase option of Daryl DK, because Barnsley did not get promoted this season. They lost in the promotion playoffs against Swansea, and you knew once Barnsley is not going to be promoted to the Premier League, Daryl DK is not going to be staying there. And that now it seems like there seems to be tons of rumors of where Daryl DK might go to, and there's definitely a lot of European club that has been linked with Daryl DK ever since he has really turned into a sensational star with Barnsley. It's going to be very interesting to see what Orlando City, and for Orlando City, I said before, where I feel like as much as they really need their DK, knowing the performance that they have in these past couple of games where they have really struggled to score goals, and they really need to have kind of like a Daryl DK kind of player to really score the goals for them. At the same time, you want to sell him now instead of later, mainly because those prices right now that is rumor that a lot of clubs are willing to pay for Daryl DK. They're probably at the highest that they ever be. And if you of course decide to wait for a bit, and let's say maybe if Daryl DK does return to Orlando City and he does kind of struggle a little bit, then those prices are going to drop. So in some way, if you do decide to keep Daryl DK, in some way you can maybe wait a little bit, and those prices can maybe stays the same or even go a little bit higher. But knowing the fact that the summer transfer window is usually the time where clubs does pay the most money compared to the winter transfer window, I feel like this is really the right time for them to sell it. And the old saying, you better sell it while the iron is hot. The iron is currently hot right now in terms of a lot of these teams want to get Daryl DK, and we'll see in these next couple of weeks what Orlando City is going to do, and we'll have more updates in terms of who exactly is going to win the bidding war to try to get Daryl DK right now. Now, moving on, in terms of next news, is that the Vancouver Whitecaps have acquired Brian White from the New York Red Bulls in exchange for up to $500,000 general allocation money, and I thought that this is a good move for the Whitecaps. Brian White, I always think that he is one of the more underrated striker in this league. I mean, on paper, he might not be the most talented number 9 in this league, but he is also a very efficient and consistent goal scorer, which is something that the Whitecaps does lack of, except for maybe Lucas Cavallini, who hasn't really got off to the best start this season. But now, knowing the fact that you, of course, add another number 9, and maybe this is a case where Mark Dos Santos want to put 2 strikers up front, or maybe put Brian White in a different row, that does add a little bit more in terms of this attacking power for this Whitecaps team, which, when you look at this season in terms of their attack, they're definitely not one of the best teams in terms of the attack, and especially a team that always tends to struggle in terms of trying to score goals from open play. Like, most of the goals that the Whitecaps have scored so far this season has come from set pieces goal, which, that's not a bad way to, of course, score goals, and the fact that they kind of becoming like what the Colorado Rapids was a couple of years ago, where they were the set piece king. But that's not something that you always want to rely on, and you want to also try to, of course, score from open play. And Brian White is also one of those players that I think he's a very good goal scorer in terms of open play. And again, this signing does make sense for the Whitecaps, and it also kind of makes sense for the Red Bulls too, because they weren't really playing him regularly, which is kind of a surprise that they weren't playing him regularly. But now they, of course, are able to get a big sum of general allocation money, of course, selling him to the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, RSL have signed Croatian defender Toni Dekonovic from Aris Thessaloniki, and I don't really know a lot about this player, but I'm assuming this is just RSL trying to boost their depth in their defense, which, when you look at this defense, they don't really have a lot of depth, and that when we did see a couple of their defender does went down with injury and replace them with a second choice center back, that's just hasn't really worked out. And RSL kind of realized that is the case, and they're looking to try to get this guy, which, again, I don't really know a lot about him. I don't know if he's going to be decent, or maybe he's going to be a starter for this team, but I'm assuming they feel like they got the right player to add in some depth pieces in their defense, in a team that, as I said, they desperately need some depth in terms of their defensive area, since they don't really have that. Now, Minnesota United have loaned a couple of players to the USL Championship. They loaned defender Callum Montgomery to the San Diego Loyals, and goalkeeper Adrian Zendejas to El Paso Locomotive. Another player that was also loaned to a USL Championship side is for Foster Langford. He is actually going to be going to the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and it makes sense, the fact that these players are going to be going to the USL Championship, because they have rarely been playing for this first team, and it just kind of makes sense, the fact that if you are these guys that is kind of like in the lower part of the depth chart, or even the lower part of the squad chart, they're most likely is going to go to the USL Championship. But at least the good news is they're not really selling them to a USL Championship side, but more like just kind of loaning them. And that, I feel like maybe this is also a case where a lot of these players, knowing the fact that they're probably not going to get a lot of minutes with the team that they're part of, they want to make sure just to go a step lower and maybe get some game times there. And maybe if they do impress in the USL Championship, maybe Minnesota might think about promoting them in the depth chart, and maybe we'll see one of these players could potentially get some minutes for this team. Now, moving on, in terms of now talk about the transfer rumors. Now, there's only one transfer rumors that I found from this week, but it's probably one that is the most talked about, not only right now in MLS, but really in the world of football, because we have heard about Lionel Messi and how it seems like most likely he was going to go to Man City, but now there's the rumor that he's actually indeed going to be staying with Barcelona, and Barcelona has actually decided to offer him a 10-year contract that is going to be worth $293 million, and there's going to be even 2 year in that 10-year contract where he's going to be spending that 2-year stint with Inter Miami, and it's going to be in the 2023 and 24 season and the 2024 and 25 season. Now, obviously, also have read the fact that even though this was a 10-year contract, it's technically kind of like the amounts that he's gonna receive is actually gonna be in a 4-year period, where in the next 2 years he's gonna be receiving 60 million euros, which is roughly about, I think, $74 million, and then after that, or actually no, in the next 2 years he's actually gonna receive 120 million euros. He's gonna receive 60 million next year, and then 60 million in the 2022-23 season. But then once he does come to Inter Miami, he also will receive the same amount, where he's going to receive 60 million euros in the 2023-24 season and the 2024-25 season. And if that is going to be the case, I think that is probably the richest contract that any MLS team has ever offered to a player in a single year. I know this still doesn't kind of beat David Beckham, where, remember, when he came into MLS back in 2007 and doing that 5-year period, he actually earned about $255 million, which that still remains as the most expensive contract that any MLS player has ever got, and I don't think that will be ever broken, unless if Messi is going to stay with Inter Miami more than the 2 years that it is. But it seems like with this contract, that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case, that after the 2024 and 25 season, he will return to Barcelona, and that his next 6 years contract is kind of a big question mark. And that, knowing the fact that Messi, I think he's now 33 or 34 right now, we know that, some people might be surprised. Is he going to be playing till he's 44? Not exactly. Barcelona says that they're actually going to still pay Messi even after his career is over, but they still haven't really kind of worked out what exactly the amount it is that they're going to pay Messi once his career is over. And I know a lot of teams, they usually don't like to do this, where they still have to pay their player after the career is over. But it's also pretty clear that Barcelona do not want to get rid of Messi, and they're basically this is kind of a desperation move that they're trying to do to keep him pretty much for the club, pretty much for a lifetime, with a quick 2-year stint in MLS. But the other thing that I also want to kind of mention this is the fact that this is probably the closest I think we have heard Messi potentially coming to MLS. I mean, I know we heard about how he was going to go to Man City and potentially is going to go to NYCFC after his time with Man City is over. But this is actually a legitimate rumors that this could potentially be the case, and that, again, if this rumor is true, and once Messi does put the signature in that dotted line in this 10-year contract with Barcelona, we can pretty much be sure that he is going to be indeed coming to Inter Miami. And if this does happen, I believe MLS is going to have like a countdown, where they're going to say this is going to be the days before Messi is going to join Inter Miami. And again, for me, for all these past couple of years, hearing these big name players, and especially Messi potentially coming to MLS, I've always been a little bit skeptical of whether or not if he's coming to MLS or not. And that, in the past couple of years, or really these past 2 years, there started to seem like there could be more cases that he is indeed going to come to MLS. But if it does eventually happen, and if he does come to MLS, I wonder what the fandom is going to be, and that I have a feeling this is probably going to be something that is similar to what happened when Zlatan came to MLS, where anytime when the Galaxy does go to another stadium, the other stadium is going to be completely packed, and everybody is going to be there to try to see Zlatan. And in some way that's not a bad thing, because after all, when Zlatan did come to MLS, he was probably the biggest profile player to ever come to this league, ever since David Beckham. And if Messi does eventually come to MLS, I think he's going to be right up there with the likes of Zlatan and Beckham, coming into this as probably the highest profile player to ever come into this league. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if this is going to be the case. And also, I know there's some people who say, well, how is Inter Miami going to afford that contract? Don't worry, they'll find a way to do that. I mean, they already found a way to try to break some of the rules that MLS set in terms of the salary cap, although they did kind of got caught because of that. But I have a feeling they're going to find a loophole in terms of that. And I really think Inter Miami, alongside with Atlanta and the Galaxy, they're probably the most expensive club, and a club that could actually afford a big contract. And especially with David Beckham, I'm pretty sure he's going to splash the money and is going to offer just such a lucrative and the most expensive contract that we're ever going to see in MLS in a per year stake, to offer 60 million euros to Messi if he does come to Inter Miami. But now moving on, in terms of the next news is that Columbus have announced full capacity for their last ever game at the historic Crew Stadium. This is great to see, knowing the fact that, the historic Crew Stadium is always a stadium that not only is memorable for the Columbus Crew, but also with the U.S. men's national team, because that's when the famed 2-0 kind of game happened in the World Cup qualifying back in 2001. And, it's great to see that Columbus is basically allowing a full capacity and have pretty much 20,000 Crews fan that is going to be watching their team play at their historic stadium one last time. Now, the only thing that I'm kind of disappointed about this game that they're going to be playing against the Chicago Fire as the last ever game at historic Crew Stadium is not going to be on national television. Like, come on, that has to be on national television. Like, I know recently there's been some teams that have been flexed their schedule in terms of what is on national television and what is not going to be on national television. Please, I really hope this needs to be on national television, because the historic Crew Stadium, as I mentioned, it's not just a stadium that is historic and has some fame moment for the Columbus Crew, but it also creates a lot of fame moment for the U.S. men's national team. And again, I just feel like they definitely should have national televised that game for the very last game before they're no longer going to be using that stadium. The Vancouver Whitecaps, they of course will be playing home games at Rio Tinto Stadium throughout July, and I haven't heard any other news about Montreal and what their stay at Inter Miami Stadium is going to be. Or it's not Inter Miami Stadium anymore. It's actually called Drive Pink Stadium now that they of course play, but there hasn't been any news of how long they're going to stay there. And the same thing with TFC. We still don't know how long they're going to be staying at Exploria Stadium in Orlando City, but Vancouver basically have said they're going to be staying to Rio Tinto Stadium through July, although they did say that there's a possibility that after July they might be potentially going back to BC Place. And as much as that might be good news for Whitecaps fans, remember, as long as the Canadian government said that the borders is going to remain closed because of this COVID pandemic, these Canadian team will just have to stay at their temporary stadium, because if the borders are not open, then simply these Canadian teams just cannot go back to their home cities and basically play away games and cross the border because of that. So yeah, as much as the Whitecaps announced that most likely they're going to be going back home in August, that could all depending on if the Canadian government decide to open the borders again between the U.S. and Canadian border. The Atlanta United have part ways with Vice President Soccer Operation Paul McDonough. This is not a big surprise, because Paul McDonough was one of the people that was involved in that situation with Inter Miami breaking the rules of actually having 5 DP in their roster, and he also got fined $250,000 alongside with Inter Miami current owner Jorge Mas, also fined $250,000 because of breaching that rule. I'm kind of surprised there hasn't been more Inter Miami staff member that have decided, or some of the people in that Inter Miami front office that decided to step down because of that situation, because this is never a good look for a team when they decide to kind of break a rule like that, and rightfully so. They were punished because of that, and we'll see how are they going to of course recover that, because the fines that they received was definitely a very hefty amount. And then finally, Jonathan Bond wins the Player of the Week, and he actually joined only a few member of goalkeepers that actually won Player of the Week, because usually when it comes to Player of the Week and how MLS awarded to which player, it's usually not a goalkeeper, but it's I think this week is justified because Jonathan Bond was unstoppable in that game against the Cali Clasico, and I did mention in my review in that game, there's really two ways you can look at how the Quakes lost that game. You could say that it was kind of frustrating, the fact that, they could have easily lost like 4 or 5-0 because they were also so giving a lot of chance for the Galaxy. But at the same time, you can also look at the other way where the opposition goalkeeper, that was Jonathan Bond, was just unstoppable in that game, and he was just not letting any ball go past his net, and rightfully so that he wins Player of the Week and made 12 saves doing that game against the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, moving on now to the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is none other than the power rankings, and I'm just going to quickly say the top 10 of the power rankings this week without going to my usual spiel. I'll talk about how the power rankings is absolutely awful, and once again, I'm seeing some teams that I feel like is harshly punished in terms of dropping down a spot, and some teams that when they did rise in the standings, that's kind of questionable in terms of the fact that how did they move up that many spots even though they did not win during this weekend. But either way, the top 3 remains the same as Seattle, New England, and Philly still is your top 3. But in 4th place, we got NYCFC moving up 1 spot, Sporting KC moving up 3 spots to round up the top 5. The Galaxy moved up 1 spot to get to 6. Orlando City did drop 1 spot to move down to 7. Colorado moved up 1 spot to go to 8th. The Timbers did move down 5 spots from last week, and they were the biggest loser. If you look at the top 10 this week in the power rankings, moved down to 9th place. And then Nashville SC was the biggest mover in the top 10, and actually now make their 2nd appearance this season in the top 10 of the power rankings by moving up 4 spots from last power rankings. But tomorrow I will do my emotional index and basically put all 27 teams on it, and that that, as I mentioned, that is pretty much my version of the power rankings, and in some way a better version of the power rankings. And yeah, I of course will do that tomorrow. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these news, and as always, if there's any news I didn't mention on the board, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.